Che Guevara. Introduction. Welcome to the story of Ernesto Che Guevara, a figure whose name has become synonymous with revolution, resilience, and the pursuit of justice. Tonight, as you prepare to relax and drift into a peaceful slumber, let us embark on a journey through the life of a man who transcended borders and inspired countless people with his unwavering dedication to his ideals. Che Guevara's life is not merely a historical account but a tale of determination, conviction, and the power of belief to drive change. Born on June 14, 1928, in the city of Rosario, Argentina, Ernesto Guevara de la Serna grew up in a middle-class family during a period of significant political and economic transformation in Latin America. From an early age, he exhibited traits that hinted at his future as a revolutionary. A voracious reader, a keen observer, and a deeply compassionate individual, young Ernesto was shaped by the stories of struggle, freedom, and resistance that surrounded him. The world into which Che was born was marked by stark inequalities. Latin America, though rich in natural resources, was plagued by widespread poverty, exploitation, and foreign interference. The influence of powerful nations and corporations often dictated the fate of its people, leaving many to suffer under oppressive regimes. These realities, combined with Ernesto's early exposure to the writings of Marx, Freud, and other great thinkers, planted the seeds of his revolutionary mindset. As a child, Ernesto's life was shaped by his family's love of intellectual pursuits and their progressive views. His father, Ernesto Guevara Lynch, was an engineer with a passion for adventure and a supporter of anti-imperialist causes. His mother, Celia de la Serna, was well-educated and politically aware, encouraging her children to think critically and engage with the world around them. The Guevara household was filled with books, debates, and an openness to new ideas, creating an environment where young Ernesto could explore and develop his intellect. However, Ernesto's childhood was not without challenges. He suffered from severe asthma, a condition that would follow him throughout his life. Despite this, he refused to let his illness define him. Instead, it became a source of resilience. Che developed a fierce determination to overcome physical limitations, engaging in activities like rugby and swimming to strengthen his body. This persistence would later become a defining characteristic of his revolutionary spirit. The 1930s and 1940s were transformative decades for Argentina and the broader Latin American region. The rise of populist leaders like Juan Domingo Perón in Argentina brought both hope and controversy, as governments attempted to address social inequalities while grappling with corruption and political unrest. Ernesto grew up witnessing these dynamics, which deepened his understanding of the struggles faced by ordinary people. He began to see the interconnectedness of Latin America's challenges and the need for collective action to achieve meaningful change. Ernesto's intellectual curiosity led him to pursue a career in medicine. He enrolled in the University of Buenos Aires Medical School, where he excelled academically while maintaining a strong interest in literature, philosophy, and politics. His medical studies reflected his desire to help others, a theme that would resonate throughout his life. Yet, it was his travels across South America that truly awakened his revolutionary consciousness. In 1951, Ernesto embarked on a transformative journey with his close friend, Alberto Granado. The two young men set out on a motorcycle to explore the diverse landscapes and cultures of South America. This journey, later immortalized in the Motorcycle Diaries, exposed Ernesto to the harsh realities of poverty, inequality, and exploitation that plagued the continent. From the mines of Chile to the leper colonies of Peru, he encountered people whose lives were marked by hardship and suffering, yet also by resilience and hope. These experiences left an indelible mark on Ernesto. He began to see the systemic nature of the problems facing Latin America and the need for radical solutions. His encounters with marginalized communities solidified his belief that only through collective struggle could true liberation be achieved. It was during this time that the seeds of Che Guevara, the revolutionary, began to take root. As you listen to the beginning of Che's story, imagine the landscapes he traversed, the people he met, and the dreams that began to take shape in his mind. This is the story of a man who believed that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It is a story of courage, conviction, and the enduring spirit of resistance. Let this tale guide you into a restful sleep, filled with dreams of a better, fairer world. Childhood and formative years. Introduction to his early life. Ernesto Che Guevara, born on June 14, 1928, in Rosario, Argentina, began life in a world marked by political turbulence and economic inequality. While his later years as a revolutionary leader are widely known, his early life laid the foundation for his ideals and relentless spirit. From a young age, Ernesto demonstrated resilience, intellect, and a profound sense of curiosity that would shape his future as an iconic figure in world history. Let us journey through the formative years of Che Guevara, exploring the events, relationships, and experiences that molded his character. A family of intellectuals and freethinkers. Ernesto was the eldest of 5 children born to Ernesto Guevara Lynch and Celia de la Serna, a middle-class couple with progressive and intellectual inclinations. His father, an engineer, was a man of adventurous spirit and firm anti-imperialist views. He often shared stories of resistance and freedom fighters, planting early seeds of rebellion in young Ernesto's mind. His mother, Celia, was a cultured and educated woman who prioritized education and critical thinking. She exposed her children to literature, art, and political discussions, fostering an environment of open-mindedness and curiosity. The Guevara household was a lively hub of activity, filled with debates about politics, history, and philosophy. Bookshelves brimmed with works by Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, and other influential thinkers, offering young Ernesto a gateway to understanding the complexities of the world. This intellectual upbringing set the stage for his later revolutionary ideology. Battling asthma and building resilience. From an early age, Ernesto struggled with severe asthma, a condition that often left him gasping for breath and confined to bed. While this illness could have limited his physical capabilities, Ernesto's response was the opposite. He developed an iron will to overcome his limitations, refusing to let his condition define him. His parents, particularly his mother, encouraged him to stay active and pursue a normal life despite his health challenges. Ernesto's resilience manifested in his determination to participate in sports and outdoor activities. He took up rugby, a demanding sport, earning the nickname Fuser from his teammates for his aggressive playing style. This determination to push his physical boundaries became a defining trait, preparing him for the hardships he would later face as a guerrilla fighter. Early education and intellectual curiosity. Ernesto's education began at home, where his mother served as his first teacher. She instilled in him a love for reading and a passion for learning. When he later attended school, his teachers noted his sharp intellect and ability to absorb complex ideas. Ernesto excelled in subjects like literature, history, and science, and he was particularly drawn to topics that explored social and economic justice. As a teenager, Ernesto delved into works by prominent authors and thinkers, including Marx, Engels, and Rousseau. These readings challenged him to think critically about societal structures and the inequalities he observed around him. He also developed an interest in philosophy, often debating ethical and political ideas with his peers and family. This intellectual foundation became the bedrock of his revolutionary convictions. Political awareness and the world around him. Growing up in the 1930s and 1940s, Ernesto witnessed significant political and social changes in Argentina and Latin America. The region was marked by the rise of populist leaders, economic instability, and increasing U.S. influence. In Argentina, President Juan Domingo Perón's policies aimed to address social inequality, but they also sparked controversy and division. These dynamics deeply influenced Ernesto, shaping his understanding of power, corruption, and the struggles of the working class. Ernesto's awareness of these issues was heightened by his family's anti-imperialist views. His father often spoke about the exploitation of Latin America by foreign powers, and these discussions resonated with young Ernesto. He began to see the interconnectedness of Latin America's struggles and the need for collective action to address systemic injustice. A formative journey across Argentina. In his late teens, Ernesto embarked on journeys across Argentina that exposed him to the realities of rural poverty and inequality. Traveling through the vast countryside, he encountered communities living in harsh conditions, struggling to access basic necessities like food, education, and health care. These experiences had a profound impact on him, reinforcing his belief in the need for social change. During these travels, Ernesto kept detailed journals, documenting the stories of the people he met and the challenges they faced. These writings reveal a young man grappling with questions of morality, justice, and the role of the individual in creating change. His observations would later inform his revolutionary philosophy, emphasizing the importance of empathy and solidarity with the oppressed. Foundations of his revolutionary spirit. By the time Ernesto entered his late teens, the seeds of his revolutionary spirit were firmly planted. His experiences with poverty, his exposure to political discourse, and his deep intellectual curiosity combined to create a sense of purpose that would define his life. He began to see himself not just as an observer of injustice but as someone who could play a role in challenging and dismantling oppressive systems. Ernesto's resilience, cultivated through years of battling asthma, and his determination to push boundaries became integral to his identity. These traits, along with his sharp mind and compassion for others, set him on a path toward becoming the Che Guevara who would later inspire millions. Conclusion. The formative years of Che Guevara's life were a period of growth, challenge, and discovery. They shaped his values, his vision, and his unyielding commitment to fighting for a better world. As we reflect on his childhood and adolescence, we see the foundations of a man who would one day become a symbol of revolution and resistance. These early experiences remind us that even the most iconic figures start as ordinary individuals, shaped by the people, places, and events around them. Let this chapter of Che's story inspire you to explore your own potential and to dream of a world where justice and equality prevail. Student years and the South American journey. Introduction to student life. Ernesto Che Guevara's transition from a curious child to a determined young adult was marked by his time as a medical student and his transformative journey across South America. These years were pivotal in shaping his worldview, deepening his understanding of inequality, and igniting the revolutionary spirit that would define his life. In this chapter, we will explore his academic pursuits, the socio-political context of his era, and the profound impact of his travels on his emerging identity. Medical school and the quest for knowledge. In 1947, Ernesto Guevara enrolled in the University of Buenos Aires to study medicine. At the time, Argentina was undergoing significant political and social changes under the leadership of President Juan Domingo Perón. Perón's policies aimed to empower the working class through labor reforms, healthcare initiatives, and economic nationalism. These efforts, while popular among many, were also criticized for fostering corruption and authoritarianism. This dynamic environment offered Ernesto a unique perspective on the complexities of leadership and governance. Ernesto's decision to study medicine was rooted in his desire to alleviate human suffering. His childhood battles with asthma had made him acutely aware of the fragility of life and the importance of health care. As a medical student, he excelled in his studies, particularly in areas related to infectious diseases and public health. He was deeply interested in understanding the social determinants of health and the ways in which poverty and inequality exacerbated illness. Despite his rigorous academic schedule, Ernesto remained deeply engaged with literature, philosophy, and political theory. He devoured works by Marx, Engels, and Lenin, alongside texts by Freud and Nietzsche. These readings broadened his intellectual horizons and fueled his growing critique of capitalism and imperialism. His academic pursuits were not limited to the classroom. He often engaged in lively debates with peers and professors, challenging conventional ideas and advocating for systemic change. Preparing for a transformative journey. In 1951, Ernesto decided to take a break from his medical studies to embark on a journey that would change his life forever. Alongside his close friend, Alberto Granado, a biochemist and fellow adventurer, Ernesto planned to travel across South America on a motorcycle. The trip, originally envisioned as a carefree exploration of the continent, soon became a profound awakening to the harsh realities of poverty, oppression, and exploitation. The journey was meticulously planned, with Alberto bringing his scientific expertise and Ernesto contributing his medical knowledge. The two young men hoped to visit leper colonies, rural clinics, and indigenous communities, using their skills to provide assistance where they could. They also sought to immerse themselves in the diverse cultures and landscapes of South America, gaining first-hand insight into the lives of its people. At this time, South America was a continent in flux. Decades of colonial exploitation had left deep scars, and many nations were grappling with the legacies of inequality and underdevelopment. Foreign corporations controlled vast swathes of land and resources, often with the complicity of local elites. For ordinary people, life was marked by poverty, landlessness, and a lack of access to basic services. These systemic injustices became increasingly apparent to Ernesto and Alberto as their journey unfolded. The Motorcycle Diaries: Encounters with Inequality. The journey began in December 1951, when Ernesto and Alberto set out from Buenos Aires on a battered Norton 500 motorcycle they affectionately nicknamed La Poderosa, the Mighty One. Their route took them through Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela, covering thousands of miles and exposing them to the vast diversity of South America. In Chile, Ernesto and Alberto visited mining communities where workers toiled under brutal conditions for meager wages. The contrast between the wealth generated by the mines and the poverty of the workers was stark, leaving a deep impression on Ernesto. He began to see the exploitation of natural resources as a symptom of a larger system of economic inequality perpetuated by foreign interests and local elites. In Peru, the pair spent time at a leper colony in San Pablo, located along the banks of the Amazon River. Here, Ernesto's compassion and dedication as a medical student shone through. He worked tirelessly to treat patients, engaging with them not just as a doctor but as a fellow human being. His experiences at the leper colony reinforced his belief in the dignity of every individual and the need for systemic change to address the root causes of suffering. Throughout their travels, Ernesto and Alberto encountered indigenous communities struggling to preserve their cultures and livelihoods in the face of marginalization and neglect. These encounters deepened Ernesto's understanding of the interconnectedness of Latin America's struggles and the importance of unity in addressing shared challenges. Political awakening. As the journey progressed, Ernesto's observations of inequality and injustice crystallized into a political awakening. He began to see the struggle for social justice not as a series of isolated issues but as part of a broader battle against systemic oppression. His encounters with the working poor, indigenous peoples, and marginalized communities revealed the human cost of exploitation and inspired him to think critically about solutions. Ernesto's reflections during this journey were recorded in his now famous journal, The Motorcycle Diaries. These writings capture his growing awareness of the need for collective action and his belief in the power of the people to bring about change. The journey marked the beginning of his transformation from a curious observer to a committed revolutionary. A new purpose. By the time Ernesto and Alberto returned to Argentina in 1952, Ernesto was no longer the same person who had set out on the journey. The experiences and insights he had gained had profoundly changed him, giving him a sense of purpose that went beyond his initial ambitions as a doctor. He now saw himself as part of a larger struggle to liberate Latin America from the forces of imperialism and inequality. Ernesto's journey across South America was not just a physical adventure but a spiritual and intellectual transformation. It was during these formative travels that he began to see himself as a part of something greater, a movement for justice, dignity, and freedom. This journey laid the foundation for his future as Che Guevara, the revolutionary who would dedicate his life to fighting for a better world. Conclusion. Ernesto Guevara's student years and South American journey were a turning point in his life, shaping the ideals and convictions that would guide him as a revolutionary leader. These experiences exposed him to the harsh realities of inequality and inspired him to dedicate his life to the pursuit of justice. As we reflect on this chapter of his story, let us remember the power of curiosity, empathy, and determination to spark change. Che's journey reminds us that even the smallest steps can lead to transformative paths, inspiring us to envision and work toward a better world. The path to becoming a revolutionary. Introduction to the revolutionary journey. Ernesto Che Guevara's transformation from a compassionate medical student to a committed revolutionary was neither sudden nor accidental. It was a gradual evolution shaped by the injustices he witnessed, the intellectual influences he absorbed, and the pivotal relationships he formed. This chapter explores the crucial years in Che's life when his ideological convictions solidified, and he embarked on a journey that would make him a central figure in some of the 20th century's most significant revolutionary movements. A world on the brink of change. The 1950s were a tumultuous decade, marked by Cold War tensions, decolonization struggles, and the rise of revolutionary movements across the globe. In Latin America, inequality, political corruption, and foreign intervention created fertile ground for social unrest. The United States, eager to maintain its influence, supported authoritarian regimes that protected corporate interests while suppressing popular dissent. For Guevara, this geopolitical landscape presented both a challenge and an opportunity. After his transformative journey across South America, Ernesto returned to Argentina to complete his medical degree in 1953. However, his experiences on the road had irrevocably changed him. Medicine, though noble, no longer felt sufficient to address the systemic injustices he had encountered. He began to see armed struggle as the only viable path to liberate Latin America from exploitation and oppression. The journey to Guatemala. In 1953, Ernesto set out on another journey, this time to Guatemala, a country undergoing significant political and social transformation under the leadership of President Jacobo Arbenz. Arbenz had implemented a series of progressive reforms, including land redistribution, aimed at empowering the country's impoverished majority. These policies, however, antagonized powerful landowners and the United Fruit Company, a U.S.-based corporation with extensive holdings in Guatemala. The U.S. government, viewing Arbenz's reforms as a threat to its interests, began plotting his overthrow. Ernesto arrived in Guatemala City filled with hope and curiosity. The city was a hub of intellectual and political activity, attracting activists, exiles, and revolutionaries from across Latin America. For the first time, Ernesto found himself surrounded by people who shared his vision of a united and liberated continent. He began to immerse himself in Marxist theory, attending meetings, debates, and discussions that deepened his understanding of class struggle and imperialism. During this time, Ernesto also forged important relationships that would shape his revolutionary path. Among them was Hilda Guidi, a Peruvian economist and activist who would later become his first wife. Hilda introduced Ernesto to key figures in the Latin American leftist movement and helped him refine his ideological perspective. She recognized his potential and encouraged him to channel his passion and intellect into action. The optimism Ernesto felt in Guatemala, however, was short-lived. In 1954, a CIA-backed coup toppled Arbenz's government, plunging the country into chaos. The coup was a stark reminder of the lengths to which powerful nations would go to maintain control over Latin America. For Ernesto, it was a turning point. The failure of peaceful reform in Guatemala convinced him that armed struggle was not just necessary but inevitable. Meeting Fidel Castro. Following the coup in Guatemala, Ernesto sought refuge in Mexico City, where he worked as a doctor while continuing to engage with political movements. It was in Mexico that he met Fidel Castro, a charismatic Cuban revolutionary leader who had recently been released from prison following a failed uprising against the Batista regime. Their meeting, facilitated by mutual acquaintances, would prove to be a defining moment in Ernesto's life. Fidel Castro, along with his brother Raúl and a small group of exiled revolutionaries, was planning an armed insurrection to overthrow Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. Batista's regime, backed by the United States, was known for its corruption, repression, and close ties to American business interests. For Castro and his comrades, the goal was to establish a socialist government that would serve the Cuban people rather than foreign corporations. Ernesto and Fidel quickly bonded over their shared vision of a liberated Latin America. Che, as he was now being called, was deeply impressed by Fidel's strategic mind, charisma, and unwavering determination. For his part, Fidel recognized Che's intellect, medical expertise, and ideological commitment. By the end of their first meeting, Che had pledged to join the Cuban revolutionary cause, despite knowing the risks involved. Training for revolution. The next phase of Che's life was dedicated to rigorous preparation for the Cuban Revolution. Along with other members of Fidel's movement, he underwent intense military training in the rugged mountains of Mexico. The training included guerrilla tactics, weapon handling, and survival skills, all of which were essential for the planned insurgency in Cuba. Che's medical background made him an invaluable member of the group, but he was determined to be more than just a field doctor. He threw himself into every aspect of the training, earning the respect and admiration of his comrades. His resilience, discipline, and willingness to endure hardship set him apart as a natural leader. During this time, Che also deepened his ideological commitment to Marxism-Leninism. He believed that the Cuban Revolution was not just about liberating Cuba but about igniting a broader movement to challenge imperialism across Latin America. This vision would later guide his actions and decisions, even as the revolution brought new challenges and complexities. The Granma Expedition. In November 1956, Che, Fidel, and 80 other revolutionaries set sail from Mexico aboard a small yacht called the Granma. Their destination was Cuba, where they planned to launch a guerrilla campaign against Batista's forces. The journey was perilous, marked by overcrowding, seasickness, and the constant threat of detection. Despite these challenges, the group remained resolute, driven by their shared belief in the righteousness of their cause. The landing in Cuba was far from smooth. The revolutionaries were ambushed by Batista's forces shortly after arriving, and many were killed or captured. Che, Fidel, and a small group of survivors managed to escape into the Sierra Maestra Mountains, where they began to rebuild their strength and plan their next moves. Building the revolutionary movement. The Sierra Maestra became the base of operations for the Cuban revolutionary forces. Over the next 2 years, Che played a critical role in the movement's success. As a military leader, he demonstrated exceptional strategic acumen and a deep commitment to the welfare of his comrades. He organized raids, trained recruits, and established networks of support among local peasants, who provided the revolutionaries with food, shelter, and intelligence. Che's medical skills were also vital, earning him the trust and gratitude of the local population. His ability to connect with people on a personal level made him an effective recruiter and a symbol of the revolution's humanistic ideals. By the end of 1958, the revolutionary forces had grown significantly, and their victories against Batista's army paved the way for the final assault on Havana. Conclusion. Che Guevara's path to becoming a revolutionary was marked by pivotal experiences, profound relationships, and an unyielding commitment to justice. His time in Guatemala, his partnership with Fidel Castro, and his leadership during the Cuban Revolution were all crucial in shaping his identity as a global symbol of resistance. Che's journey reminds us that revolutionary change requires both vision and action, as well as the courage to confront immense challenges. As we reflect on this chapter of his life, let us draw inspiration from his unwavering belief in the possibility of a better world. The success of the Cuban Revolution and its aftermath. Introduction to Victory. The Cuban Revolution was not just a military triumph but a transformative event that reshaped the political and social landscape of Cuba and inspired revolutionary movements across the globe. For Ernesto Che Guevara, the success of the revolution was the culmination of years of struggle and sacrifice, yet it was only the beginning of a new chapter in his life. This phase of Che's journey reveals his role in shaping post-revolutionary Cuba, his growing ideological commitments, and his eventual departure from the island in pursuit of global revolution. Let us explore the story of the Cuban Revolution's victory and its aftermath, a period of triumph, challenge, and ultimate transformation. The final push for Havana. By late 1958, the Cuban Revolutionary Forces, led by Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, Camilo Cienfuegos, and others, had gained significant momentum. Batista's regime, plagued by corruption, inefficiency, and declining morale, was on the brink of collapse. The Sierra Maestra guerrilla fighters had expanded their reach, capturing key towns and rallying support from peasants, workers, and students alike. Che Guevara played a pivotal role in the final phase of the revolution. As the leader of the revolutionary column known as Column 8, he was tasked with advancing toward the city of Santa Clara, a strategic point on the way to Havana. The Battle of Santa Clara, fought in December 1958, was one of the most critical moments of the revolution. Che's leadership and tactical ingenuity were on full display as his forces derailed an armored train carrying government reinforcements and supplies, forcing Batista's troops to surrender. The victory at Santa Clara opened the path to Havana. Batista, realizing that his regime was no longer tenable, fled the country on January 1, 1959. The revolutionary forces entered Havana triumphantly, greeted by cheering crowds who celebrated the end of a dictatorship and the dawn of a new era. For Che, this was a moment of both joy and reflection. The revolution had succeeded, but the challenges of building a new society lay ahead. Post-revolutionary Cuba. The revolutionary government, led by Fidel Castro, quickly set about transforming Cuban society. Che Guevara, now a prominent figure in the new regime, took on several critical roles. As both an idealist and a pragmatist, he sought to implement policies that reflected the revolution's core principles of equality, justice, and sovereignty. One of Che's first responsibilities was overseeing the agrarian reform program. As the head of the National Institute of Agrarian Reform, he worked to redistribute land from large landowners to peasants, aiming to address the deep inequalities in Cuba's rural economy. This policy, though popular among the poor, faced resistance from the former elite and foreign corporations, particularly those based in the United States. Che also served as president of the National Bank of Cuba and later as Minister of Industry. In these roles, he spearheaded efforts to diversify the economy, reduce dependence on sugar exports, and promote industrial development. He believed that economic independence was essential for Cuba's political sovereignty and worked tirelessly to achieve this goal. However, these policies faced significant challenges, including resource shortages, a lack of technical expertise, and growing hostility from the United States. The Bay of Pigs and the Missile Crisis. The revolutionary government's alignment with socialist principles and its growing ties with the Soviet Union placed Cuba at the center of Cold War tensions. In 1961, the U.S. government sponsored an invasion by Cuban exiles at the Bay of Pigs, aiming to overthrow Castro's government. Che Guevara, though not directly involved in the military response, was a vocal critic of U.S. imperialism and played a key role in mobilizing Cuban resistance. The invasion was a failure, strengthening the revolutionary government's position and deepening its commitment to socialism. In 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. Che, a staunch advocate of anti-imperialism, supported the Soviet decision to deploy missiles in Cuba as a means of deterring further U.S. aggression. However, the crisis also exposed the vulnerabilities of Cuba's reliance on Soviet support. For Che, this period reinforced the importance of fostering revolutionary movements globally to counterbalance imperialist powers. Che's growing ideological commitments. As Cuba stabilized under the revolutionary government, Che began to focus more on his ideological pursuits. He wrote extensively, producing essays and speeches that articulated his vision of socialism and the role of revolutionary struggle. His works, such as Socialism and Man in Cuba, emphasized the importance of creating a new kind of individual, one motivated by collective welfare rather than personal gain. Che was deeply committed to the idea of internationalism. He believed that the Cuban Revolution was not an isolated event but part of a broader struggle against imperialism and oppression. This conviction led him to support revolutionary movements in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, providing both moral and material assistance to those fighting for liberation. Departure from Cuba. By 1965, Che had become increasingly restless. Though he remained committed to the Cuban Revolution, he felt that his role in the government was no longer sufficient to advance his vision of global revolution. He decided to leave Cuba and dedicate himself to fostering revolutionary movements abroad. Che's first destination was the Congo, where he sought to support anti-colonial forces fighting against Western-backed regimes. However, the mission faced numerous challenges, including internal divisions among the rebels, logistical difficulties, and Che's own frustration with the lack of discipline and commitment among his allies. Despite his efforts, the campaign in the Congo ended in failure, and Che returned to Latin America determined to continue the fight. Legacy of the Revolution. The success of the Cuban Revolution had a profound impact on the world. It demonstrated that a small group of determined individuals could challenge and overthrow an entrenched regime, inspiring countless movements for liberation and justice. For Che Guevara, the revolution was both a personal triumph and a stepping stone toward his broader vision of global solidarity. Che's contributions to post-revolutionary Cuba were significant, though not without controversy. His policies and decisions reflected his unwavering commitment to socialism, but they also highlighted the difficulties of implementing radical change in a complex and hostile environment. Despite these challenges, Che's legacy as a revolutionary leader and thinker continues to resonate, reminding us of the power of conviction and the enduring struggle for a more equitable world. Conclusion. The success of the Cuban Revolution marked a turning point in Che Guevara's life, transforming him from a guerrilla fighter into a global symbol of resistance. His efforts to reshape Cuban society and his commitment to internationalism reflected his deep belief in the possibility of a better world. As we reflect on this chapter of his journey, let us draw inspiration from his courage, determination, and vision, and remember that the fight for justice and equality is a collective endeavor that transcends borders and generations. Bolivia and his final days. Introduction to the Bolivian campaign. By the mid-1960s, Ernesto Che Guevara had become an icon of revolution, admired and feared in equal measure. After his instrumental role in the Cuban Revolution and his efforts to spread revolutionary ideals globally, Che set his sights on Bolivia, a nation he believed could serve as a catalyst for a wider Latin American uprising. However, his campaign in Bolivia would prove to be the most challenging and ultimately the final chapter of his life. This phase of Che's journey is a story of unwavering commitment, harsh realities, and enduring legacy. Why Bolivia? Che's decision to focus on Bolivia was rooted in both ideological and strategic considerations. Bolivia, located in the heart of South America, was seen as a prime location for sparking a continent-wide revolution. Che believed that a successful insurgency in Bolivia could inspire neighboring countries, particularly Argentina, Peru, and Chile, to rise against their oppressive regimes. Bolivia's majority indigenous population, many of whom lived in extreme poverty and faced systemic discrimination, seemed to Che like a natural base of support for a revolutionary movement. The Bolivian political landscape at the time was volatile. President René Barrientos presided over a military-led government that suppressed dissent and aligned closely with U.S. interests. Bolivia's economy, heavily reliant on mining, left the working class vulnerable to exploitation, while rural communities struggled with landlessness and poverty despite agrarian reforms. These conditions, Che believed, were ripe for revolution. Preparation and arrival. In 1966, Che disappeared from public view, leaving behind his roles in the Cuban government and a letter to Fidel Castro declaring his intent to take the revolutionary fight to Bolivia. Traveling under the pseudonym Adolfo Mina Gonzalez, he arrived in the Bolivian countryside to establish a guerrilla base in the Nancahuazú region. Che's guerrilla group, the Ejército de Liberación Nacional, ELN, comprised a mix of Cuban veterans and Bolivian recruits. However, the group faced significant challenges from the outset. The rugged terrain of the Andes presented logistical difficulties, and the lack of local support hindered their ability to sustain themselves. Many Bolivians were skeptical of the insurgents, viewing them as outsiders rather than liberators. The ELN's inability to build strong alliances with local communities would prove to be a critical weakness. The struggles of guerrilla warfare. Unlike the Cuban Revolution, where the guerrillas had gained widespread support from peasants and workers, the Bolivian campaign was marked by isolation and hardship. The ELN struggled to establish reliable supply lines and secure the trust of the local population. The Bolivian military, with the support of U.S. advisors and the CIA, launched a relentless counterinsurgency campaign that exploited these vulnerabilities. Che's diary from this period, later published as the Bolivian Diary, provides a stark account of the challenges faced by the guerrillas. The entries describe dwindling resources, mounting casualties, and the psychological toll of isolation. Che's health also began to deteriorate, with his lifelong asthma exacerbated by the harsh conditions. Despite these difficulties, Che remained resolute, often writing about his belief in the righteousness of their cause and the necessity of sacrifice for the greater good. Betrayal and capture. By late 1967, the ELN had been severely weakened. A series of military engagements had decimated their numbers, and the remaining fighters were constantly on the run. On October 8, 1967, Che and his group were ambushed by Bolivian forces in a remote area near the village of La Higuera. After a brief firefight, Che was captured along with several of his comrades. Che's capture was a significant victory for the Bolivian government and its U.S. allies. For them, it was an opportunity to eliminate a symbol of revolution and send a clear message to other insurgents across Latin America. However, Che's captors were also aware of the risks of turning him into a martyr. After a day of deliberation, the decision was made to execute him. Execution and last words. On October 9, 1967, Che Guevara was executed in a small schoolhouse in La Higuera. His final moments were marked by courage and defiance. Witnesses reported that he faced his executioners with dignity, refusing to beg for his life. His last words, addressed to the soldiers ordered to kill him, were reportedly, "Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man." Che's body was displayed publicly as proof of his death before being buried in an unmarked grave. It was not until 1997 that his remains were discovered and returned to Cuba, where he was laid to rest with full honors in a mausoleum in Santa Clara, the site of one of his most famous revolutionary victories. The legacy of Bolivia. Che's campaign in Bolivia, though a military failure, had profound symbolic significance. His willingness to sacrifice everything for the cause of liberation solidified his status as a global icon of resistance. While his vision of a united Latin American revolution did not materialize, his ideas and image continued to inspire movements around the world. In Bolivia, Che's legacy remains complex. For some, he is remembered as a foreign intruder whose actions brought suffering to local communities. For others, he is celebrated as a hero who fought for justice and equality. Monuments, murals, and museums dedicated to his memory can be found throughout the country, reflecting the enduring impact of his presence. Conclusion. Che Guevara's final chapter in Bolivia was a testament to his unwavering commitment to his ideals. Despite overwhelming odds, he persisted in his fight for a better world, embodying the principles of sacrifice and solidarity. His life and death continue to inspire debate, reflection, and action, reminding us of the complexities of revolutionary struggle and the enduring power of belief in a cause greater than oneself. As we reflect on this chapter of his story, let us remember Che not just as a symbol but as a man who dared to challenge the status quo and dream of a more just and equitable world. Legacy and influence. Introduction to his legacy. Ernesto Che Guevara's life, ideals, and actions have left an indelible mark on the world. As a revolutionary leader, he inspired millions with his unwavering commitment to justice and equality. However, his legacy is far from one-dimensional. Che remains a polarizing figure, celebrated by some as a symbol of resistance and criticized by others for his methods and ideology. This chapter explores the complex and multifaceted legacy of Che Guevara, examining his influence on political movements, cultural narratives, and the global imagination. A symbol of resistance. Che Guevara's image has become one of the most recognizable symbols of rebellion and defiance. The iconic photograph taken by Alberto Corda, commonly known as Guerrillero Heroico, has been reproduced on posters, clothing, and art worldwide. For many, this image represents the fight against oppression, imperialism, and inequality. Che's life story, marked by sacrifice and dedication to his ideals, resonates with those who seek change in the face of adversity. In Latin America, Che is celebrated as a hero who fought for the dignity of the region's marginalized communities.